Welcome back, everybody, to a tier list. This is where I am not the only one on here, so I love doing it because the whole onerous isn't necessarily on me. I have Scott helping me out today as we talk through the tangent.
Yeah.
So, Scott, who are you and why are you on my channel?
Yeah. Why have I invaded your space? Well, thanks for having me on here. I'm Scott. I started a YouTube channel called the Prog Corner 4.5 months ago, and no small part because of Notes Reviews. Your channel got my immediate attention because I was writing for a webzine called The Fire Note. So I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Who are they? What do I need to know? So I became instantly hooked on your channel and started realizing we had very similar tastes. And then after about a year of following you, I was like, I need to just start my own YouTube channel. So you are really responsible in no small part for the Prog Corner. So thank you for that. But yeah, it's been going really well. I hope you've been checking me out occasionally because I still watch all of your content. So.
Oh yeah. I watch a lot of your videos. It's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah. Cool. Good. Yeah, I'm excited about what we're doing here today. I love the tangent. When you and I first talked about doing a collab, I could only really think of two artists that made total sense to do a tier ranking. It was either going to be Taylor Swift or it was going to be the tangent. There's some cool intersections there I don't even want to know about. But,
hey, that's all right. We'll put a pin in Taylor Swift. Maybe we'll revisit it in the future.
Who knows? But I was a huge fan of the Flower Kings. So when I heard about this band that Royna Stalt was somehow involved with, I had to get to know them, and I bought their first album, and I've been a fan ever since, actually.
Wow. So right from the beginning
of the tangent, but I'm embarrassed to say I did not know anything about Andy Tillison's previous band, Parallel or 90 Degrees. And that's a shockingly embarrassing admission to make because that was an incredible band. But the tangent's even better. And I'm really excited to talk about all these great records today with you because I know you're a fan too. So I don't think I've ever talked to another human being in my entire life who likes the tangent. So this is pretty cool for me.
Awesome. Yeah. So how I found the tangent was kind of in my exploration of prog when, I had consumed everything from the 70s, looking forward to try to figure out what was coming out currently. And I had already dove into all the Flower King stuff up to that point. And just loved it. I love the lush sounds. And I was trying to find anything tangentially similar,
so to speak.
And at that point, they had just released Not As Good As the Book. And I know it was making a massive wave through the Prog archives and all the Prog websites that I was visiting. And I'm like, okay, I'll give it a try. And the first disc was pretty good, but it was that second disc that I'm like, whoa, okay, I need to go back and listen to this whole discography because this is intense. And I've been a fan pretty much ever since then.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a great album, an underrated album actually in their discography. So we're gonna have some fun talking about these records.
I think so, for sure.
I can't wait. There's 12 of them, and I'm of the opinion that they've never put out a bad record. So I don't know, that F category. We're gonna have to talk about that as we go along. I'm not quite so sure, but yeah, they clearly have some that are better than others. So
I was gonna, there's a few
gonna be interesting.
I know that we're going to have a differing opinion, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted you on here, because I love talking it through. I love having my mind changed on things. So yeah, because there are a few albums in their discography that I would say are pretty bad, but that's just from my opinion. That's just from my standpoint.
All right. But I guess I'm just an Andy Tillison fanboy at this point. I really am a big fan of what he does. And I'm sure you heard the Italian album that they did last year with Jonas, and
that was really good. But yeah, let's dive in and talk about their debut album, the first one. I'm going to move it right in the center, blow it up for us. The Music That Died Alone.
Oh yeah.
I remember doing some research about it, and I wish I was around when it first dropped, because man, what a project. Incorporating people from the Flower Kings and all these different bands to create such a really interesting project.
It really was. It really was. I mean, at the time, you had 3 members of Parallel or 90 Degrees. Besides Andy Tillison, Guy Mannings is still in the band. Sam Bain is in the band. And then you had the 3 members of the Flower Kings. So it really was this, this powerful thing where you had the Flower Kings and this other band with the great David Jackson.
It reminded me of what Yes did with Drama, when it was Yes and the Buggles kind of like coming together. Instead of like, I appreciate the fact that they didn't call this another either Flower Kings record or another Parallel or 90 Degrees album. They decided this is its own thing. Because it really is.
And it was supposed to be a one-off. At the time, there was no plans for playing live. There was no plans for a second album. This was just something that Roy Nestalt and Andy Tillison had been shooting around, I guess, sending emails and stuff, talking about doing, and they finally ended up doing. I don't think they understood quite how good it was going to be, because I'm going to make a case that this is their best album.
Interesting. Okay. So back that up a little bit. Why is this their best album?
I believe it's structured in such a way, and one of my minor quibbles with the Tangent is Andy is not a great song sequencer. He knows it. On his Facebook page, on the Tangent's Facebook page, he's always asking his fans, okay, I've got a 15-minute epic and then a 5-minute pop song, and then he'll tell you about the songs. What order should I put them on? He doesn't know how to do it. And that drives me nuts on Tangent albums, especially this new album, by the way. But this album is structured in such a perfect manner. I wouldn't change a thing. It starts out with that real upbeat keyboard pattern. And then it just flows all the way through to the Canterbury sequence. And then it just ends on such an incredible high note. It's structured perfectly. And that's I think one of the main reasons why I would put it at the very top. But there's a couple other albums that have a case to make also. It's not an open and shut case here, I don't think.
I would say that this is one of my favorite albums from the Tangent.
Okay, good. I'm glad you were.
Yes, for many of the reasons that you had said. I think having more hands on the driving wheel in this case actually serves for a positive, instead of it being like too many cooks in the kitchen. I love the dynamics between Ron and Andy and how they're able to play off one another. I think they play to each other's strengths. And I love the epics that are on this one. And I think part of that is, again, how they're structured, how they play out. It's not just like a sequence of 18 minutes, 20 minutes of just like kind of jazz noodly prog. It's very, very well thought out. So,
and it's they almost telegraph that in this case, the epics are in separate sections. They're actually ID'd out as separate tracks. So I think that kind of gives you an idea that they were actually thinking about structure, whereas some of the later epics, they're just one big chunk of music, and sometimes they can meander a little bit.
So for me, I wouldn't necessarily say that this is an S album. I can understand, and I totally can see why. For me, this is like an A album. I think it's more than a B, because I think they definitely came to it and they did a lot. And the only reason why I would keep it out of the S is only because I didn't want to sully it, because I have like 2 albums that are clearly S tier.
Okay, I've got a couple that are in that cusp between the A and the S. This is definitely one of them. I'm comfortable with an A rating here.
Okay, so we'll we'll put this one, and I'll remember that, because you compromised in this one. I think I can compromise on a couple other ones. So we will.
We may have a couple compromises,
and that's fine.
I could see that happening.
That's
Definitely.
fair. So then let's go to the follow-up then.
Oh yeah.
Let's go to the follow-up, and that is The World That We Drive Through.
A challenging album. Do you want to talk about this one first?
I'll take the lead. Yeah. And this is one that I will fully admit, I don't listen to this one quite as often as their first album. I still come back to it because I do like how it's if this were a Flower Kings album, this would be very similar to the first disc of like Flower Power, where it's a consecutive like flow of music, you know, like even though everything's broken up into sequences and chunks, it really is like a unified piece.
Yeah.
And in that sense, like I really like that they tried something different and they didn't just try to copy their first album. Because I do know like there is something to be said about the sophomore slump. And this one has a little bit of that.
It does.
But I still think that there's, you know, there's enough really great music on here to justify coming back to it. And I keep having to remind myself. I keep having to say, you got to listen to this one because there's still some really, really good movements on it.
There's some great stuff on it. And as we were talking about before we went live, I went back and listened to all 12 Tangent albums. And as I intimated, there were some that didn't live up to expectations and others that actually surprised me.
Okay.
This has always been my least favorite album from the Tangent.
Interesting. Okay.
And my opinion has changed.
Oh, good.
It's changed significantly. Okay. I find The Winning Game to be an absolutely amazing opening track. My problem was always the gap in the night. I just thought it went on way too long. And then finally you get a little bit of Roy Nostalt at the end and it's anticlimactic. I was dead wrong about this album. It's actually really, really good. Roy Nostalt, maybe he's not as involved in the songwriting on this album, but his guitar playing.
It's just exquisite.
And I'm sorry. I just did a top 25 prog drummers, and the great Zoltan Sorch made the list.
Good.
His drumming on this album is better than on the first album. His tones are better. His kit was mic'd better, and I believe they're a little higher in the mix. Wow. Zoltan Sorch, man, his drumming on this album blew my mind. So, you know, I would have given this an F or a D a couple of days ago.
So where are you feeling now then?
I'm thinking it's in that BC category.
I would agree. Yeah. I think that there's enough on here. For me. Yeah. Now this will be interesting because I know that you said that this one was your least favorite one.
Yeah. It was.
And like, I feel comfortable either at a B or a C. I feel like this one's more in a B than it is a C, because I think there's more to like about this album than to not like. But I don't know if I want to go all the way to a C. Because
let's do B. You know, honestly, I was so happy with this record, shockingly so. I even really enjoyed the change in woodwind players. You know, David Jackson's no longer here. Now you got Theo Travis. He's been there ever since.
Love Theo.
He never left. He's just perfect for the Tangent. He's the guy. So yeah, I got no qualms with that there. It looks right to me.
Okay. So I will let you take the reins for this one to start off. The third album, A Place in the Queue. Because I have many things to say about this album. So
if there was a Tangent album to challenge the first one in terms of greatness, I'm thinking it's this one, which is really weird because there's no Roy Nostalt on this. Where did these songs come from? Probably my favorite Tangent song is In Earnest. What a way to start an album. The storytelling of the old dude at the bar, and he's dreaming of, you know, the glory days in World War II. Oh, my little tear coming down the eyeball at the end of that one.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't stop there. It just keeps going. The shorter tracks. are beautiful and wonderful. I love it when Andy's talking about listening to Yes instead of Susie Quattro, and you know, all those weird personal references. And then it ends on such a beautiful note. You know, I talked about how the song sequencing is problematic with the Tangent. This is another album that's really perfect. I have zero qualms with this album. You know, Zoltan Sorch is no longer in the band either, but what are we gonna do? Oh, let's get Jamie Salazar. Come on, man. You don't miss a beat. They're similar drummers, obviously both played with the Flower Kings, so they have that similar style, but he's actually a little more energetic of a drummer. And the way he locks in with Jonas Rheingold, what an amazing rhythm section. I just love their Flower Kings records, the two they did together, Space Revolver and The Rainmaker, and then they did two together here. Just a great rhythm section. I love this album. If this is one you were thinking about an S rating on, I'm not going to argue with you. This is definitely one of their peaks in the discography, I think.
Yes, I fully agree with everything that you said.
Thank you.
This one for me is my favorite Tangent album.
Okay.
And part of that is the structure. They nailed the structure not only between the songs, but within the songs themselves. I mean, In Earnest is structured beautifully and perfectly, telling the story, the narrative style, the storytelling aspect of it. I love the theme and how it's reprised in the title track, A Place in the Queue. And it wasn't until like the third or fourth moment, like listen through of this album, because I was in university when I first listened to this. There's a moment in Earnest when they actually start to say he's last in the queue, but they cut it off because they don't want to give too much away.
Right.
So, and even the title track, they do something that I love, and I really wish more bands do, where they introduce little chunks of the big climax at the end. So you have the main like chorus, and then it's reprised the second time so that it reminds you about it. And then they have this other chorus that they play around with. And so the big finale of it is the blending of these two choruses together.
It's a huge payoff. Yeah.
Oh, it's a great exercise in setup and payoff that I feel like maybe they lost along the way, which is a really big shame. And I think that a lot of modern prog needs to learn how to properly set up a motif and really how to pay it off. So
I think CD versus vinyl run times have a little something to do here, and that bands aren't really thinking about the structure as much as they did when they had a nice tight 38 minutes of music. And that's a shame, because an album to me is a lot like a movie. And if you give me a really powerful ending, or like a M. Night Shyamalan kind of ending, I'm all in. I'm gonna forgive a lot of weaknesses or failures along the way. Give me that payoff at the end, and this one definitely does that. Absolutely. Good call.
And I even love a lot of the smaller tracks, you know, I love, Do It Yourself Surgery and GPS Culture, and like
GPS Culture is just
all of these. It's just sick. And I love the fact, and we'll talk about it very, very later on, but how they kind of reprise it in the new album.
They do.
But I for some reason I just love Sun in Your Eyes, you know, how it's essentially this disco track. Talking about how great progressive rock is.
It's a disco song about prog rock.
Which I love that oxymoron. I love that juxtaposition on all that.
Andy's a very clever guy. He finds ways to mess with your head all the time.
And I love how this is structured very similarly, and it's actually in the liner notes of like Tales of Topographic Oceans. Because they keep saying, this album's good, but go listen to that first. That one's and I don't know, I like both of them, but for me, absolutely, this is an S.
Do it.
This is one that kind of solidified the legacy of the Tangent, and like made them more than just a really, really good and interesting kind of side project of these artists to its fully flushed out band. So
I think the only problem with the Tangent and their 12 album discography is that those first three came first. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard to
It's
equal that, but honestly, they've soldiered on very, very well, and there's a lot of great stuff yet to come.
Yeah. And
You
speaking of,
mentioned album number 4 as kind of your entry point.
it is. This was the first one that I really listened to, and I got the deluxe version. So this is the one that came with the small book. I see it right over there on my little CD stand that I've got there. And it was funny because when I first listened to this album and when I first got into it, I actually enjoyed the book more than the album itself. So even like as I was thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, this album is good, but it's not as good as the book that it came with. Which I thought was funny.
Not as good as the book.
Not as good as the book, because I love the story. I love this guy that, I think he falls asleep or something and he wakes up in the future, and how everything isn't what he was promised. And that's the whole concept of this album. And how like these big government overlords found out that if you play Sound Chaser from Yes at just the right level, you are matching the unstruck chord that is vibrating and keeping all of reality in sync. And if you play it at just the right level, it's like the counter tone that you need to disqualify it, and you could destroy all reality. Great. It was so fun. It was so fun. Now, the thing that I love about this album, as I mentioned before, is that second disc. The first disc is good. It has some really good tracks on it. I love the first track. I love the second track.
Crisis in Midlife. That's a great song.
Great track. I mean, I don't necessarily connect with it quite yet. I have a few more years to go.
But
I can see how. I do like that last track though. I love how it's, this rock anthem, this biker track. I really enjoy. But man, that second disc, the title track of Not As Good As the Book and the Full Gummit is probably my favorite track from them, which is odd because like it mirrors a failed relationship in that the first 6 to 7 minutes, pure bliss, absolutely pure bliss. But then once you get past that, it starts to get pretty rocky and it starts to fall apart on you until you get to the very end when you start to reminisce and you start thinking about it. You're like, yeah, you know what? It sucks, but it's still pretty good.
Now, was that the track that was actually an old Parallel 90 Degrees?
I'm not sure.
I think the Full Gamut is an old P at a 90-degree track.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
But I'm pretty sure they messed around with it a lot, and it's probably unrecognizable. But I think that track off that bonus disc was actually a cover song.
Interesting. A self-cover. Yeah, interesting. I didn't know that. I'll have to go and find out about that. Because
we need to verify.
It's one of my all-time favorite prog pieces. So this one for me is one of a mixed grab bag because the first disc is good. It's like no problems really with the first disc. It just
there's some good tracks.
But at the end of the day, kind of forgettable. It's that second disc that I just keep coming back to.
As disappointed as I was with The World That We Drive Through, which I was, this was another one that I was not crazy about. It had some real highlights, and I think we probably share what those are. Oddly enough, but this one I've never really warmed up to a whole lot, and I'm not really sure why that is. This has got Jocko Jaksic all over it.
It does,
and maybe that's part of the problem. I thought Krister Johnson on Placing the Cue, and of course Roy Nastalt, both have this incredible guitar tone that is just so sumptuous, and you just want to go swimming in the guitar tone. Jocko's got a whole different way of playing, man. And I like it, but it's just it didn't quite work with the tandem.
I was gonna say it's different, right? It's almost at odds. Because I was lucky enough to see Jocko, I believe, when he was touring with King Crimson.
He's incredible.
I was blown away. I'm like, holy geez, who's this guy? Right. But it does feel a little bit more at odds with the sound that they had set up with their past albums. But so I agree to that. So it's interesting because like the good tracks on here elevate this album, and unfortunately the not so great tracks bring it down.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm
agree.
wavering. I want to put this, like, I don't want to put it in C because I think that would be a disservice to those good tracks, but I wouldn't want to put it anywhere higher than a B.
Yeah, I'm between a B and a C here.
Yeah. So let's split the difference. Let's put it in B for right now.
We can leave it there for now. It's not terrible, and it's got Jamie Salazar on drums, so
it's got some great stuff. Yeah, it might just be like where I was when I first listened to this.
I think so in a lot of cases. Yeah, that's what happens.
I remember picking this guy up and then going up to my family cottage in Muskoka for like a full weekend just by myself. And I spent the entire weekend just listening to this album. And the other album I picked up was Arion's 01011001. So I had those two albums to keep me company throughout the entire weekend. So yeah, I have some fond memories with that.
I bet. I bet. Yeah, and it's funny how those memories they really trigger a lot.
Absolutely. And speaking of,
this is a weird one here.
Yeah, this
is a weird one.
It's very strange, especially to follow up as good as the book. So Down and Out in Paris and London. I think like they're continuing a couple of tracks that had already kind of come before with the whole Down and Out kind of travel log kind of a type of a track. I'll admit this is the album that I come back to the least. I don't know. There's not a whole lot to really get excited for on this album. And even as I listen to it, I'm like, it's fine, but I'm not all that excited about it.
Yeah, this was another one that I wasn't super crazy about when it came out. But over the years, I must say that opening track, Where Are They Now? The epic, I don't know how long, I think it's like 20 minutes or something like that. It's one of those. That one has grown on me a lot. The rest of the album, not really so much. But that first track, that opening track, I adore it. I love it. If I'm putting a best of the Tangent mix together, that's the only song from this album that's gonna make that. And it makes it because it's just incredible. But what's weird about this album is most of the guitar is being played by Andy here.
And he's not a great guitarist. Like, he's a great synthesizer. He's a great pianist, but
a very, very good drummer.
Great drummer. Like, when he's able to master the kit, but I never really enjoyed his guitar playing, especially when you have to compete with the legacy that was Jocko and
and who's fixing to come, on the very next album. There's going to be another monster in the band. So this one just feels, being a guitar player, I do look at that stuff. You had Jocko before, and of course you're going to have Luke on the next album, and then this one doesn't have any of that. So although Jocko does appear on one song.
That's true. So there is something to look forward to.
But it's not a memorable record overall.
No, and for me, it would also unfortunately provide a roadmap for kind of how they would approach their songwriting ship, kind of moving forward. So like, if you had said that this would be like a D or an F, I wouldn't have faulted you for that, and I would have probably agreed with you. I do think like that first track is enough to elevate it out of the F category and kind of into the D category.
For me, it does.
Yeah, and I would agree. Like there are some things to be excited for that first track. It's just the rest of the album I can kind of take or leave, and I'm not.
Yeah, they revisited that Canterbury sequence. They did the part 2 to that, and it was just a lot of noodling and didn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, I'm all for noodling, but you got to go somewhere.
That's right. That's
like, right. I do understand that, it's the journey, not the destination, but you still want to go somewhere.
Yeah. Hopefully. That's the idea anyway.
Yeah. So now we come.
This is another interesting one.
Another really strange one. Calm.
It is, man. This is a weird record by the Tangent.
Yeah. I mean, I look a little bit more favorably on this one than I do Down and Out, mainly because of the two epics that are on here.
Yep.
This one has a little bit more kind of substance to it, like the Wiki Man and Titanic Calls Carpathia.
They're both great epics.
They have some really, really good moments on it.
Yeah.
I do feel like this is the start of their needing somebody in there to help organize the ideas.
Yeah.
Because unlike some of the past epics that we had, I don't feel as though these epics are structured all that well. And they just kind of bounce from one idea to another idea to another idea to another idea without really having any kind of a roadmap of like why or how. And
no, they're definitely structured differently than the previous epics. There's no doubt.
Absolutely,
and I think, maybe this is where that songwriting approach started. Maybe it was Wikiman and Titanic Calls Carpathia.
Yeah. So, and then like, unfortunately, the smaller tracks on here, like the Mind's Eye, Shoot Them Down, and Tech Support Guy.
I kind of like Tech Support Guy.
I was going to say, that's Tech Support Guy is fun. I like that one because that one reminds me of like Sun in Your Eyes and that big biker track from Not As Good As the Book. But I think that Shoot Them Down is a massive snooze fest. It's one of the weakest tracks.
I'm not a fan of it.
Yeah, and the Mind's Eye is fine, but nothing really to write home about. So when you have one really, really fun track, a snooze fest, and an okay track, that's kind of where I'm at. I come back to this one, as I mentioned, more than Down and Out, but not a whole lot more. So that's kind of where I'm at for this one.
Yeah. I have it slightly higher than Down and Out in Paris and London for two reasons. One, it's got one extra epic that I like, where Down and Out only had one. And the second reason is Luke Matchin is in the band at this point. And his guitar playing elevates everything that he's in. I know you were a big fan of that Cyan record that came out last year. Dude's just incredible. So just his playing alone is like, oh, thank you, Andy. Smart, very intelligent guy. He knew there was a weakness in the band. He knew he needed to fix it, and he did. But those songs in the middle just really do bring it down somewhat. So I'm kind of thinking this might end up in C territory.
I was thinking the same thing. So I'm glad that we're so far pretty much in tandem with everything there.
I think that's fixing to change though.
Yes, I think as we get closer.
Yeah, because I've got a couple favorites of the later era, which don't seem to sync up with what everybody else seems to think. So I think the easy part's over. Now we're getting into the
That's true. That's true. Although I will say, we come to Le Sac de Travail. I'll let you start this one. What do you think about this one?
This is what's so great about this band. Every time you flash a new one up, I'm like, oh, this is a weird one for the band. Oh, this is a real outlier. This one really is an outlier. This began life as a version of Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. Believe it or not, the Stravinsky family estate has been very active legally, protecting the estate and the copyright. They said, oh, absolutely not. That ain't gonna happen. So he had to rework a lot of this stuff, and it became the Electronic Symphonia with the weird name that nobody can pronounce, thus ensuring that this sold worse than any of the other Tangent albums.
That hurts me.
Which is too bad, because this combined with the EP, which I can't pronounce that one either, man.
Who knows?
L'étagère du Travail. Oh my goodness, I love that EP so much. You combine it with this. This is a minor masterpiece. I don't think it's their best record. But it's something totally new and different. And he's doing all these virtual instruments. He's basically recreating the sound of a symphony orchestra. It's brilliant. You get David Longdon singing on a couple tracks. You got Gavin Harrison on drums. You got the return of Jonas Rheingold. So your rhythm section on this record is Jonas Rheingold and Gavin Harrison. Excuse me. Sign me up.
Oh, absolutely. Two of my favorite rhythm, like Gavin is one of my all-time favorite drummers, like everything the man touches turns to gold.
I got him at number 4
Yeah,
behind
and
Portnoy, Peart, and Bruford.
yeah, I can't argue
Those are
with
the
that.
only 3 I have higher than Gavin Harrison in the history of mankind.
Yeah, I can't think of like outside. The only other person I might put on there is Phil Collins, but like,
Yeah, Phil's right up there.
oh man, like
I got Phil at number 5, actually.
I was gonna say, if Phil was at number 5, I'm not gonna fault you for that.
Yeah, I got Phil at 5 and Carl Palmer at 6. So that's
that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, but Gavin is just a monster. This album is really, really, really good. It really is. It misses the mark in that I think there were a couple sections and the third movement that went on a bit too long. And I could have done without the 2-minute narration at the beginning, but these are minor quibbles to a really, really cool record.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, The Rite of Spring is one of my all-time favorite pieces of music.
Love it.
And the fact that this one mirrors that in terms of tone, in terms of structure, in terms of presentation, I can't fault it for using the roadmap that it does. And just the energy that is injected into the Tangents music from this album is, especially with the last 2 albums of Calm and Down and Out, I was just craving for something with a little bit more oomph, a little bit more power. And the overall concept on paper, it's like, well, why on earth would you do a concept album about a day in the life of an office worker? Like, who on earth would want to listen to that when that is so many people's day-to-day lives? Like that was all of my, like, from 23 all the way to about 31, that was my whole life. And so why would I want to listen to a concept album about that?
And especially if you're not from England. I mean,
that's it.
Andy's always referencing, stuff about the UK, but here he's talking about Stephen Wright's afternoon radio show. I've never heard Stephen Wright, man. I can't relate to what you're saying here, dude.
Exactly.
But it still works.
Oh, absolutely. And I will say it, like, at that point in my life, I was living in Toronto, and the parallels that I was drawing between, like, the businessman in London and life and times in Toronto, like, the parallels were crazy. And
I can see that.
All that mixed with some of the Tangents' best music. I love all the different movements and how it's reflected in the concept. You wake up, have this burst of energy when you first wake up, and then you have that afternoon slump. You come back, you're
lazy. Yep.
That's right. And then you finally get home to put your feet up for a couple of hours before you have to wake up and do it all over again. For me, I agree that this is a minor masterpiece. This is one of the few albums that I would not argue it going into the S category because of the energy that's brought to it, the new ideas that are brought to it. It was the perfect thing that the Tangent could have done.
And they needed it too. Like you said, they had 2 back-to-back albums that weren't bad. They were good.
But this one,
they needed something. Andy needed to recharge his batteries. And I guess, hey, if Stravinsky does it for you, I got no arguments there. I'm a big Stravinsky guy too. So
absolutely. So this is my second favorite album from them.
I'm good with an A or an S here.
I'm going to put it into the S because for me, as I mentioned, this is one of 2 or 3 albums that I would allow in the S.
Okay. I think I had like 3 or 4 that were hovering between the A and the S. So we're doing good so far.
I think this might be where our opinions differ.
This is where we go all haywire.
Okay.
This is where we go all haywire.
A Spark in the Ether, The Music That Died Alone, Volume 2, a technical follow-up to their first album.
Only at the behest of Thomas Weber from Inside Out Music. By the way,
I could imagine.
He was tired of Tangent albums not selling so good, so it figured the little tag bringing people back to the debut might help record sales. That's how that happened.
and that's why it pains me to find out that La Sac de Travail was one of the lowest selling albums, because it's one of my all-time favorites. Like, this is, don't let the numbers dictate whether or not an album is good. That's my own little piece there.
Well, they never even bothered with vinyl on it. From the Calm on, they've all been on vinyl except
that hurts me, because that's one of the few that I would literally pick up in physical format. Like, I would shell out the money to pick it up on record.
As you can see behind me, I will buy them all.
I was gonna say,
if it's on vinyl, I'm buying it. I love these guys.
Yep. So I can't remember who started the last one, but I'll let you start with A Spark in the Ether, because I think you might be a little bit more favorable than I am.
Oh, I know I will be. This is one of those weird ones that for some reason this album just entered my life at just the right point in my life. And I was writing for the Fire Note, and I'd been writing for them for about 1.5 years when this dropped. And I'd been really wondering, how come I haven't given anything a 5 headphone review? This was my first 5-star rating for the website. And I'll come down a little bit. It's not perfect, but I still love it so much. This is probably the one I return to the most often. I think it's so ridiculous. It's so over the top. The knowing winks to, Prog fandom and Emerson, Lake and Palmer in particular. And then you have the epic about, the great American West. And then you get the cop show vibe, the streets of San Francisco thing going on. It's just a ridiculous album. It's way over the top. It's contrived. It shouldn't work at all, but for some reason I cannot get enough of A Spark in the Ether. I love it. Yeah, I understand now that A Perfect Score was absolutely foolish, but that's where, objectively and subjectively. Objectively, I know this is not their best album. Right. I understand that, but I just love it so much, and I can't really explain why, but I think maybe a little bit of it has to do with the drumming of Morgan Agron on this record. And so you have now the same rhythm section as Kepa. You got Jonas and Morgan together, and I don't know, there was some magic spark, so to speak, on this album for me. I know it's not viewed very highly amongst the tangent aficionados out there who kind of look at this as a weak point in their discography. And I guess I understand that, even though I totally disagree with that.
Hey,
but yeah, I have a feeling you're probably going to have a little difference of opinion on this one.
Yeah, and I can't, now that I'm thinking about it, I can't remember if this one or if their previous album was their first album that I reviewed on my channel. I remember when this first came out, and I was angry about this album. I did not like it at all. The only tracks that I liked in any way, shape, or form was the title tracks of A Spark in the Ether and A Spark in the Ether Part 2. Those were the only 2 tracks that I would listen to, because the big epic of the Celluloid Road was...
you weren't digging that?
It was just way too wandering, and I remember it was just like, how many film references can we fit into a song at one ridiculous point? Like, all of the heavy lifting on this album is done by references. Like, cod pieces and capes are all references to the Prog legends of the past.
That's right.
Like Ian Anderson's cod piece and Rick Wakeman's cape. But it was... And that track actually made me angry, because I agree with the sentiment that Andy is putting down, because Andy's being like, we're the next wave of progressive rock. We're the ones that are selling the albums. We're the ones that are keeping the prog flag flying. Why aren't we getting recognized by those legacy bands? Like, why isn't Emerson, Lake and Palmer? Why aren't any of these bands recognizing us as the next big wave?
Which I kind of took exception with. I mean, this is the same dude that had David Jackson in his band, right?
Okay. So, like,
just checking in.
I get where he's coming from, but the way that it was presented, I just felt as though it was well, why are you guys recognizing me? I'm trying so hard and I don't get any. I'm just like, but it's not a good look.
Yeah, I see that.
You let your legacy be the music that you produce. Don't let anybody else tell you about it. But I digress. I was just really angry with this.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I wonder if Andy regrets some of those sentiments, but you know, he wears his heart on his sleeve.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't fault him for that. I do remember this was the only review of mine from the Tangent where he interacted, and he just said, well, you can't please them all. And really? I was just like, oh man, why was it this one that you had to watch?
Nice.
Okay, I guess that's egg on my face. So yeah, and after Eugene, I just thought it was a worse version of, Careful With That Axe, Eugene.
Clearly another reference, like you said, the album filled with reference points. Yeah, even the title of the album is a reference to their debut. The whole thing is one callback after another.
Yeah, and I'm just I don't know. I wasn't a fan.
Even the artwork, I mean, they even have the Ed Unitsky art is very similar. So yeah, I understand everything you're saying is valid. I still love it.
Hey, I understand.
In my world, it would be an 8, but clearly I know this is something that we're gonna have to compromise down on, because I know I'm in the minority. I know that it's not as good a record as I think it is, but I still just love it.
I mean, this was going to be the first F for me, and I love how different. I love how different it is, But some of the things that you were mentioning, how quirky it is, how strange it is, I'm allowing myself to be elevated a little bit more.
Okay.
So I'm with what we're saying and what we're putting down, I feel as though somewhere between a C and a B.
Okay. Well, I know your feelings. I think the only way to do this equitably is to give it a C.
A C?
Yeah. Because I'd give it an A, you'd give it an F. Let's split the difference.
I feel okay with that. I feel okay with that, because there are a few albums that are coming up that I have less favorable opinions on. Because
I figured within their discography, I had one album that most people really didn't care for that I really did. We just went over that. And then there's another one coming up that everyone just loves that I really don't like at all.
You're not a big fan? Okay.
Yeah. Those are going to be the 2 ouch points, I think.
Okay. Well, speaking of, let's move on to, I'm going to make this one big as well. The Slow Rust of Forgotten Machinery, or Where Do We Draw the Line Now?
Yeah.
I enjoy the concept of this album and the idea of this album more than the album itself.
Yes.
I really, really, really love the idea of when technology advances and we scar the earth with it, when it is forgotten and left, that is the only tether for those who would have never have experienced it in the first place.
Yeah.
The examples being the railroads, the actual paved roads, but now it's like the internet connections. It's all these other ideas and I love that idea. And I really wish that they would have made more of like an actual concept album out of that, rather than it being kind of just a catch-all for a bunch of tracks that they had ready to go.
Yeah.
When
the first song dropped, I don't know if you remember, prior to this album's release, they about 2 or 3 months ahead of the release, they dropped that 20-minute track that Few Steps Down the Wrong Path, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And I was so excited about this album's release. And I was a little let down. This was the other one I was talking about. Yeah, it didn't deliver on the promise, I don't think.
I agree. Like, I have some issues with A Few Steps Down the Wrong Road.
The punk section doesn't work, by the way.
It doesn't. And I mean, this is coming from somebody that doesn't necessarily like punk.
I love punk. I'm a punk rocker, and I don't.
I know. I know that about you.
Yeah.
And so that's why, like, for me, if punk is done well, I can appreciate it for what it is, but it's just not my taste,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like postmodern art, right? Like, I understand the appeal. I see where it fits in with the cultural zeitgeist. It's just not for me, right?
Just yeah. Yeah.
So
Not in my
um,
wheelhouse.
that's exactly it.
Yeah.
For me, though, I think the biggest, like, the big bait and switch where, you know, they're trying to say like, oh, this is where we're headed, and oh, surprise, this is actually where we've been before. I'm like, you could see that coming down the road miles away.
Yeah.
Like, I could have seen that bait and switch like coming right as you were setting it up. But I just felt like the big motif that they used, which was Jupiter, you know, the bringer of joy, was such an odd choice to use as the anthem for this.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's supposed to be like this, oh, they've elected these really bad people into power and they're going to use it to abuse it. Why are you bringing the anthem of joy? Why didn't you want to use like Mars, the bringer of war?
Interesting.
Right? Like, it's just, for me, it was just a really weird choice. And this was a continuation of Andy making a lot of these really weird choices. I understand kind of where he's coming from, but yeah. Now, that being said, I know we've kind of picked apart a few steps down the wrong road. When the album itself dropped, I was less than stellar about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoyed the opening track of the Two Rope Swings.
The Two Rope Swings song was nice.
It was great. I do think that the slow rust, the big 20-minute, just doesn't go anywhere.
Didn't go. Yeah. Didn't move.
It wandered around the landscape, and I'm like, okay, if you put a gun to my head and told me, name a passage from Slow Rust, I would have had my brains blown out. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it.
And I just listened to the record yesterday, and I couldn't.
Yeah, I listened to it this afternoon, literally hours ago, and I still can't put a single finger on that.
I do like the instrumental though. Was that Dr. Livingston?
Dr. Livingston, I presume. Yes,
that's nice.
I think,
and I do like this album's got female vocals on it.
It does. Yeah, the first one.
She only lasted one album. I don't know what happened to her, why she, didn't show up on Proxy or any of the ones that followed. But it was kind of nice having that counterpoint to Andy.
It was a little bit of a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
But yeah, outside of Dr. Livingston, I presume I could leave this album. This is another one for me that I would feel just fine putting in a D or an F.
Yeah, I'm actually in the same boat. A lot of people love this album.
Yeah, I don't see it. Not for me.
Yeah, it's one of the higher rated ones on Prog Archives.
Mm-hmm.
I got issues with it. Andy's a good drummer, but when you're coming from Morgan Agron and Gavin Harrison and Zoltan Sorge and Jamie Salazar, and now you're giving
it's just very lackluster.
And then I started feeling it was a heavy album, all the immigration and Syrian refugees and Trump, Clinton. It just became a real oppressive record. The album cover definitely indicates that a little bit, but there was very little light. It was all shade.
I was going to say, I know that Andy leans on his influences, and one of his big influences is Roger Waters, who does a lot of these kinds of things. But I think the difference is Roger is able to see the bright side of a horrible situation. Whereas I don't think Andy has that same kind of level of like looking a little bit on the bright side, like in terms of like melodies and creating the emotion that's needed to capture the complexities of these.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
There might be something to that. Yeah, I'm honestly, if there's an F in the bunch, this is it.
Yeah,
I'm not going to argue with the D either.
I feel okay putting this one into the F because unfortunately, with the assignment that they had assigned to themselves, I think they botched it. This is the first F because So let's talk about an album that I like a little bit more.
Yes. Oh, yeah. You want to go on this?
Let's talk about Proxy.
Yeah, let's talk about Proxy. Go for it.
I love Proxy. Again, much like Le Sac de Travail, this was such a breath of fresh air. You know, we've got three big epics that are around a few smaller tracks. I mean, smaller being like, 8 to 9 minutes. Um, but
But
man,
they're great.
they're great. Like, this is one of the things, like, and this is why the Tangent is so frustrating as a fan of theirs.
Yeah.
I'll be given two albums that I'm like, I don't connect with it. I don't get it. And then they'll come out with Proxy, and I'm like, yes, this is what I want. It's new, it's fresh, it's funky. I love the title track. I love the adulthood lie, and I love the ideas of it. And I even love like the bonus track of excerpts from Exo Oceans.
That was great too.
It's such a great album. And I
Yeah.
think part of it is just a clear focus, a simple concept, and just a great execution of it.
Well, you're talking about bonus tracks. You can't not mention Supper's Off, which originally appeared on that EP that was with the Sacre de Travail. They re-recorded it with some new lyrics. Both versions are amazing. It's so good, man. Proxy is if I said there were 3 or 4 Tangent albums that I get really excited about that I could put in that A or that S slot. Proxy definitely they achieved what they set out to do. Like you said, 100%. if there was a brief and they had to fulfill it, they most certainly did. Sometimes Andy's ideas kind of overshoot the songwriting. He wants to do so many things, and he's so talented, and he knows he can do it, but sometimes it just doesn't work. And you see him trying to connect dots, and they just don't quite make it. Every single dot connects on this thing.
Yeah. Like, for a lot of his albums and a lot of his concepts, the grasp is farther than the reach is.
Right. Exactly.
And this one, it met it exactly where it needed to be. And yeah, I love how I mean, you could basically listen to the first 4 tracks as like the actual album itself, and then have Supper's Off and excerpts be like the bonus track, and you have like a single physical disc, right? You've got the first 2 tracks on the first side, the second 2 tracks on the second side. Perfect runtime of music, in my opinion. I think that this has some of the more interesting concepts. And with the 2 bigger tracks of Proxy and Adulthood Lie, it's one of the few later epics that are actually structured very well.
Yeah, they are.
You know, they're not just noodling away, just, that weird kind of jazz stuff that they like to do. There's actual like thought put out for it. There's proper structuring going on.
And they're individual. They're unique. They don't sound anything like each other.
Exactly. Yeah. So having this was the last one that I would have no problem putting into the S or the A category. I think out of the 2 that I have in the S category, this one's the weakest one, which is why I would feel okay with it being in the A category.
Yeah, I think that's where it should go.
Perfect. I like that we're on the same page for all.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked that Spark in the Ether has been our only minor disagreement. Well, actually, pretty big disagreement.
Well, I do like how others kind of came together.
Oh, that's right. But, gotta make some sense of this.
It's true. It's true. We still have 2 albums, so who knows?
We do.
Okay, so now we are moving on to Auto Reconnaissance. And
every time the Tangent announces a new album, I get all excited. It was no exception when this one was announced. And this is one of the few times where I was not really thrilled when I picked it up. Life on Hold was a nice little song. Jinxed in Jersey was, kind of funny the first time you hear it. The big epic that ends the album is good, but it's structured kind of in a way that it loses my interest. Absolutely. I've tried, but to me, this still lands near the bottom of the Tangent discography. I don't find a whole lot here that I even remember. It, to me, feels a little jazzier, and not in a Canterbury jazzy kind of way, just in a noodly kind of way. And it just, I don't know. To me, when you're making fun of people's accents, when that's the highlight of the album, you probably got a problem.
Yeah, I am glad that we both agree, because I am in the exact same boat. I remember Yeah, I remember I put this on because this is when I moved out of Toronto, and moved away like 4 hours north, and then another 4 hours north after that. So there was a lot of in between where I had like 4 to 8 hour road trips ahead of me.
Yeah.
And I remember I put this on when it first came out, and I had to take breaks.
Yeah.
Like this was one of the few ones where I'm like, okay, like I finally understand why people who are not prog fans don't like prog.
Yeah.
Like I finally get it. I finally get it. And like as much fun as those travel log tracks that Andy does, I feel like Jinxed in Jersey is probably the weakest of all of them, because as much as I like the actual idea of, he's going off to try to find the Statue of Liberty, but he wants to do it at the grassroots kind of a way. And he basically sneaks by, and it being like this big allegory of like the immigration policies within the US at that time. I really like that kind of concept of it. But I also feel like this album was weighed down by a lot of the lockdown stuff and a lot of the COVID stuff, because Life on Hold was like the first track that came out that kind of dealt with that. And like, I was still like, that's the last thing I want to think about right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wasn't a big fan of those two tracks because of that. Under Your Spell, I thought was very, very forgettable. It's one of the most forgettable tracks of them. And the big epic of Lie Back and Think of England, I think it's their longest track. Like it's 28
It's like 29, I think.
Yeah. And like you said, it doesn't go anywhere. It's jazzy, but not with a purpose.
It's got some nice parts, a couple melodies that are nice. And I expect it to be this real emotional and heartfelt love letter to the England of yore and Tillerson yearning for that greatness. And I didn't feel anything. And maybe it's being an American and not understanding, everything Andy's referencing a lot of the times. But this album didn't do it for me. And you made an excellent point. I really think lockdown might have hurt these guys a lot when it came to this album, because the follow-up, they were in the same room for a lot of it, and they were able to, do more than just file sharing. This one does feel a little mailed in.
Yeah, and I think this was the first one where Andy wasn't at the controls for mixing and mastering. I think he actually got somebody else to do that. And you can kind of hear that. Like on the one hand, it's a little bit more vibrant in the mix, but on the other hand, it doesn't have that tangent signature on it. So it's a very interesting mix in that sense. And unlike some of the past albums where at least you had like one or two fun tracks to help, this one doesn't have any.
No. You're right. The shorter tracks are bummers really on this one. Yeah, they don't really hold your interest. And you know what? A little fun fact about this album: this is the first Tangent album with the same lineup as its predecessor.
Interesting. So you would have thought that like they would have had some good momentum going on.
Yet another reason why I was real excited about this album. The good news is that they kept the exact same lineup intact for album number 12.
That's good. Because I feel like they got too comfortable and they stagnated.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at.
That's what this album kind of felt like.
Yeah. So
and maybe Andy changing personnel all the time, maybe that does help keep ideas fresh. And maybe you do get into a little bit of rut every now and then in a long career, but when you're changing people out, you end up with Gavin Harrison on an album and come up with something like the Sacre de Travail, so maybe there's something to that instability that helps him a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, that was one of the things that I loved about Prog, is that you would have these new personalities coming in. You can see how those personalities help shape this new iteration of the band. Right.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So, I mean, if we put the Slow Rust at an F, this one follows suit for me.
It does.
Unfortunately.
F or a D. I think it's an F because I think it's my least favorite.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. This one, and I listened to it this afternoon thinking there's got to be something on here that I'm missing.
Yeah.
Nope, wasn't missing anything.
No, I didn't find it either, because I did the same exact thing. I scoured these albums, man. I was looking for any little nuggets of gold on this one in Slow Rust, and I just didn't get it at all. But I have a feeling both you and I will be doing album reviews for this next one here in the next little bit.
Yeah, let's bring this up.
Yeah.
The songs from the Hard Shoulder. Yeah, I've been, and luckily enough, we both have advanced copies of it, so we're able to really get into the music beforehand. So,
thank you, Inside Out.
Yes, thank you, Inside Out, for that.
We love you.
Yes, yeah, this one, like all of them, it's a very interesting one. I'm really enjoying like getting into this album proper and like really digesting it, because really it's just the 4 tracks. There's 4 big meaty tracks on it. You know, you've got The Wasted Soul being the smallest track, the last track. But
the wasted track.
Yeah.
What's that even there for?
It could have been fine with just the 3, you know, but whatever. The Changes, GPS Vultures, and the lady tied to the lamp. I think my favorite track out of all these is probably the GPS Vultures.
Yeah,
I like how they're bringing back the GPS culture from, you know, my favorite album of theirs. And it's a full instrumental, and 17 minutes worth of an instrumental is a task, you know.
To keep my interest, it is.
Yeah. And I feel like they did a pretty good job at it. You know, it kept me engaged for the full 17 minutes. I do wish that they had like a really big crescendo, like a lot of these longer instrumental tracks do. Like I'm thinking about like Tubular Bells or Omadon from Mike Oldfield. I'm thinking of like Atom Heart Mother from Pink Floyd.
Right.
They all have these like big meaty crescendos to like justify the runtime. Didn't quite feel it on that, but that's
you don't quite get the big big cadence at the end. You really don't. But there's so much cool stuff going on that it's almost forgiven that little minor complaint
I can forgive
about
them
it.
A little bit. I can forgive them a little bit.
And I really do like the changes. The single edit that came out, I did not like it.
Wasn't
I'm
a
like,
fan.
What is this? And then you hear the whole entire piece. You're like, okay, now I understand. I really like it a lot. And then you get that lady tied to the flagpole song. That one took me a minute. That was my least favorite of those 3 epics. But I've come around to it. I really like it now. I just wish that Wasted Soul song hadn't been there. Just make it a Tales from Topographic Oceans, 4 epics, 4 sides, include the UK cover, because they do that in The Dead of Night, which honestly is outstanding. So that should have been your album right there. Once again, it's just so weird. I mean, you got these 3 giant epics and then a 5-minute R&B song, and that's your album.
Wow. And I mean, on the one hand, I do like The Wasted Soul a little bit more, only because it reminds me of like Sun in Your Eyes and the more quirkier aspects, and they haven't really done anything like that in a long time.
Right.
It doesn't work here, but I appreciate that they tried something new. I'm not as big of a fan of The Lady Tied to the Lamppost, and I'm hoping that eventually it'll connect with me. It just felt like what Ian Anderson was doing very successfully with like Aqualung, being like a very social commentary of individuals that find themselves on the street. And on the one hand, I feel, and I might be reading into this a little bit too much, but I feel as though it's Andy, because he repeats it over and over again. He's like, oh, I walk past a woman that's on the street and now I'm thinking of lyrics. It's like, well, these people really shouldn't be your muse for your art. They should be people that you are helping. And making money from them, I'm not quite sure is a good look, you know. Again, that's just me reading too much into it. That's just me reading too much into it.
Who wouldn't think about song lyrics when you're walking downtown Leeds or wherever he was, and you see some lady with bungee cords keeping her upright on a lamppost so she can get some sleep at night so the rats don't crawl on her. Let me think of some song lyrics.
It's very interesting.
That's a good one.
It's very interesting. So maybe I need to warm up to it a little bit more. There's some really interesting music on it. I will admit this is much better much better than their past 2 records.
Yes.
Again, we seem to have like 2 records that are okay, one that's really good, and then 2 records that aren't so great. So
yeah, it's a weird discography. A lot of peaks and valleys. Yeah, this one is, it's still so fresh and so current that, I think we can allow ourselves a little bit of room for error on this one, a little margin for error, but
there's definitely a massive asterisk on this one being
exactly. Thank you. A double asterisk on that. And I'm thinking this might be in C territory for me.
That's what I was thinking.
In that it's better than a D. It's way better than Down and Out.
I would agree that I wouldn't feel comfortable putting it into a D. It's not as good as a B, just seeing the albums that we have in
let's see. Yeah, it's not as good as The World We Drive Through.
Yeah, but
so C sounds right.
I was going to say, seeing the tracks that are in the C, that's about the level that it's at. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm at for that. Let's finalize the list with our last album there. And I am excited to see how the overall public takes to this album.
We're gonna get killed. We're gonna get murdered. You know how people are, man.
That's
we're gonna get Andy commenting on it. And...
absolutely. But I mean, this is a good smattering. Like, it's pretty even across the board.
Yeah, not bad. I feel pretty good about that.
So do I.
I'm shocked. I really thought we were going to have some issues, and it turns out Spark in the Ether was the only
one
major disagreement we had.
Yeah, it seems like all the other ones we were pretty much on the same page.
Yeah.
So we picked a good band.
yeah. Clearly we did. I love the Tangent. It's so exciting for me that a band that's been around this long can put their 12th album out and it's still important. It's still relevant. It's still good. I'm going to be buying the vinyl. That's for sure. And I love Andy. I love how outspoken he is. I love how he just doesn't care. He's going to speak his mind. You don't have to agree with him. And I love his rebel spirit. He is a punk rocker playing prog.
That's exactly it.
I love that about Andy. He's a rabble rouser. He's a troublemaker. He doesn't care about anybody but his muse. He cares about his art. And that's all an artist should care about. He's a troublemaker. He's a practical joker. That whole Italian band thing he did last year, that Tillerson, Rheingold, Tarante, I guess he was pranking some music journalists, trying to pawn it off as old Italian stuff. Hey, what do you think about this? I mean, and then you got the whole Watcher of the Skies thing. I don't know if you know that from the Com bonus disc, where they have this fake broadcast. Peter Gabriel singing and doing Watcher of the Skies on a French radio program, and the internet went all crazy. Andy's a jokester. I love his spirit. I wish more musicians in Prague, took themselves a little less seriously and just had some fun with it, and that's what he does. I adore him. I love the Tangent, and I'm so happy that you invited me onto your channel.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think you nailed it right on the head. Andy is a punk rocker playing prog. Absolutely. So thank you so much for coming on and helping me chat about the Tangent. There's so many albums to chat about, and we did it very, very well. So thanks.
I think we did. I think we nailed it, man.
I think we did too. Yeah, self-assessments, they're great.
Very accurate too.
Exactly. So if you haven't followed Scott yet, please do. I've left his link down below to go and follow. He does some amazing reviews. Not all of our reviews line up in terms of what we think about them, but we do cover pretty much the same material. So if you're looking for another opinion that isn't necessarily mine, Scott is a great person to check out for that. So please go and support. And is there anything else you want to leave the watchers with?
Well, I am just excited to see what your actual review is going to be on this latest Tangent album. But I just want to leave you with Black Midi just dropped a new single today.
So excited. So excited.
Oh, did you hear it yet? Did you listen to it?
I'm saving myself for the actual album
Good
itself.
boy. I couldn't do it. I couldn't. I like
so
to do
excited.
that. I couldn't wait.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad I didn't wait. It's amazing. It's
Oh,
so
good.
good. Black Midi, baby.
Oh boy. Okay. Okay. Well, maybe we'll have you on to help me review that once it actually
That
does
could be
drop.
fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it could
I
be
mean, we
fun.
could do a tier ranking, but that'd take about 5 minutes.
Yeah, there's just 3.
Yeah.
But yes, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you
Thank you.
all so much for watching. Yeah, go show Scott some love, and that's all we've got. So until next time, Scott and Notes, we're out.
Out.